Okay, the next step would be to create the birds class, the bird classes. Okay, now to start off here, you need to create a birds.h. I'm making mine plural, birds.h, and a birds.cpp. There's going to be a bunch of constant values that I'm going to be using, okay, to control the speed and the point totals and things. Okay. It's just basically we're setting up the basics. So now I'm going to define the bird objects. Okay. So just like with the bullet, a bird is a flying object. So I'm definitely going to need to include the flying object .h. Oh, need the quotes there. And I will define a bird class, which will inherit from the flying object class. So a bird is a flying object. Okay, just like a bullet is a flying object, a bird is a flying object. So it inherits everything that a flying object can do. Based on a point and a velocity, it's going to fly across the screen. And it's going to be alive for a certain amount of time. All that's already built in. So we only are going to define what makes the bird unique. Private section, public section. Okay. So we'll define the constructor for a bird. We need a reference to a point, just like we did with the bullet. And the alive is going to be true. And we set the point to whatever point they give us. Okay, so that's, don't forget your semicolon, there we go. So the basic constructor there. So now we're going to have two pure virtual functions. We're going to have one that does draw, since that one by the flying object says we have to have a function, we have to implement a function called draw. And so we're going to pass that along and say, okay, I am saying any object that inherits from bird has to implement the draw function. So same thing with an integer hit function. The hit function has to return a value so you can control the points. But we're saying any bird that inherits from basic bird class has to define a hit class. It has to be a unique hit class. Okay, so that's your basic bird. But we're never going to create a bird object and have it fly across the screen. We're going to create specific objects that inherit from the bird's base class. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a normal bird. So I'm going to make another class called normal bird. Okay, and it inherits everything about the bird. So a normal bird is a bird, and a normal bird is a flying object because a bird is a flying object. Okay, so it's got lots of things it's inheriting and lots of things it can do besides just what we're seeing here in the class. Okay, so I'm just going to define a public section here. Don't have any real properties I need to save for a normal bird. So the normal bird is just going to be able to use the birds constructor. We pass it a reference to a point. I haven't said this maybe before properly, but the is-a and has-a relationship, the normal bird here is a bird, is a flying object, but a normal bird has a point. And a bird has a point, and a flying object has a point because it's one of its properties. Okay, so the normal bird constructor is just going to play off of the regular bird's constructor using a point. And okay, so we have to implement the virtual function draw.
Yes, you did.
And we have to implement the virtual function integer. It has to return an integer for hit. Okay, so we have a normal bird. Now the normal birds are the ones that are going to actually get created. We're going to be able to talk about birds in the game file like they're just bird classes, even though they're going to be specific ones. Okay, we can generalize when we're talking, when we're storing things, but we're going to be specific when we're actually drawing things. Okay, so in birds.cpp, we need to make sure to include the birds.h. And again, just like in the bullet, we need to include UI draw. It has all the tools for drawing and the math for the logic and stuff. All right, so we're going to, we're not going to implement anything about bird by itself. We're going to focus on the specific stuff. So I'm going to say, okay, normal bird. Normal bird, the constructor here has a constant pointer to a point because it has a point, and it inherits the constructor from the bird object. Okay, so in the bird, in the normal bird, we're just going to set the x direction equal to a random value between 3 and 6. And the y direction, we'll set it to a random value between 0 and 4. Okay, so the point, or the direction is going to be random. Which direction, who knows? It's going to be flying through the screen. And we'll just say, okay, if the point variable has a y value greater than 0, just to control the way it's going to fly here. Okay, if it's at a certain height, we're going to change the dy value and multiply it by -1 so it goes the opposite direction. Okay, so if it's too high, it'll start going down. Otherwise, it'll go up. If it's too high, it'll go towards the downward direction. Okay, also in the normal bird constructor, we need to make a velocity object, and we will set that new velocity to the value we just calculated, so the random value we just got. Okay. And then we can use that temporary velocity object to set the velocity of the new bird. Okay, so it's going to get a random velocity direction that it's going to be going across the screen. Okay, the other things we need to do for the normal bird is we need to do the draw and the hit function. Okay, we only draw it if it's alive. And instead of a point like the bullet, this time we're going to use this draw circle function. It's a different shape. The circle function takes a point and a radius, which I've defined as bird radius for the normal bird. Okay, so that's the draw function. We're drawing a circle based off of the UI draw function. And to define the hit function for the normal bird, okay, if a bird gets hit, it's going to not be alive anymore, so we call the kill function. And we return, I've defined a points for normal bird in one of my definitions from the H up here. Points for a normal bird, so it'll be a 1 point, and it'll be easy to change that from here if I ever wanted to. So the hit is going to return a certain number of points. So the other types of birds might return other numbers. Sacred birds might be negative numbers. Tough birds might be more than that. They'll be a little different. Okay, so now we have the setup for the birds.